Hello there. What is going on, everyone? Today we are looking at Tamashii, Chronicles of Ascend. This is the latest new game coming to Gamefound from Awaken Realms Lite, and I think you are absolutely going to love it. This is actually a breathtakingly beautiful game. I'm a big fan of the cyberpunk style art that we're going to be seeing in this game, as well as in the art book that came recently with Great Wall. I've been really hyped about this for a long time, so I'm thrilled to be able to show this to you. However, I do want to let you guys know that this is a prototype, so everything that you see here is subject to change, but this should give you a pretty good idea of the flavor of the game and how it plays. And if you like what you see, I invite you to stick around. Consider clicking that subscribe button. It definitely helps out. Plus, like the video, share the video. Let me know what you think down in the comments section. Plus, we do giveaways all the time, so I encourage you to stick around for that. I will be putting links that you are going to want to check out in the description below, as well as links to Gamefound, where you can find Tamashii, Chronicles of Ascend, which is coming very, very soon. And with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump right in and take a look at Tamashii, Chronicles of Ascend. So Tamashii is a story-driven bag builder that is going to be using some really unique elements of hacking and trying to unlock and use new augmentations and new special abilities, all while you explore the city by flipping over hexes while moving characters there and having quests, and all of it is going to be controlled by quests and quest cards. And of course we have the prologue here, which we'll kind of use as sort of a brief demonstration purpose. You're going to be taking the role of one of 4 random walkers at the beginning of the game, and you will get new bodies. Basically your spirit will be kind of going into to different bodies via sort of like being uploaded almost into new hardware. So it's got that very techno cyberpunk kind of feel to it. You're also going to be getting one of 4 decks to start out with: a Fatalist, Aquarist, the Runner, or the Anonymous, and those are going to have different augmentations that you start with and can get, so it kind of has a class system built in there. Now, this game can be played solo. This game can also be played with 4 people. There are different scenarios that are more cooperative, and then there is also some PvP elements for certain scenarios, although, it's kind of like what you want it to be, it can be. So if you feel like playing PvP, you can play a PvP scenario. If you feel like playing cooperative, you can play a cooperative scenario. If you feel like playing solo, you can actually play this by yourself. You can just play a solo, or you can control multiple characters if you want to do that as well. Now, here for the prototype, we do have standees and miniatures. I want to show you guys some of these miniatures, and then I will show you how the game plays. All right, so the prototype actually has 5 that we're going to look at today. So first off, we have the Rogue. These are different bodies that you're going to be able to get. You can actually jump into multiple bodies in a game. So if you decide maybe for one part of a quest that you want to be the Rogue, and then later on that you want to become the Guardian here, you can absolutely do that. And so here's the Guardian. Now, again, these are prototypes, but this is really cool sculpting, really a lot of detail in here. These would be really, really fun to paint too, especially with the big influence of like blues, pinks, and purples that are prevalent throughout this game as well. So I'm liking that. Here we have the Hacker, kind of sitting on the brick wall there, just casually hacking in. And hacking is kind of a big aspect to this game as well. There's a really cool board, and it's almost like a sub game within the game of kind of arranging your powers and kind of we're going to talk about that because it's a really cool cyber deck system that you have. This is the Visioner. Really cool, kind of very like Dr. Octopus almost, but like I'm getting some Matrix vibes from this one. Very cool here. I like that, and he's by the way, his feet aren't on the floor too, right? So this is really cool sculpting as well, because he's not even on the ground. His augmentations there are picking him up. And this is the Quaminator, and he's got the really cool acrylic shield that is part of him there as well. Really nice looking. And so again, these are just some samples. There are actually more as far as more different bodies that are available. These are just the miniatures that we have in the prototype just to look at. So this is just going to be some of what you will see. Plus, there are also enemies. There's lots more. I think there's probably gonna be. I would bet you that there will be more miniatures than just this, but this is just what I have to show off. So very cool stuff. Let's take a look at a little bit how the game plays. So we've already set up our hexes, and we're going to kind of set up hexes at the beginning of the game based on our scenario. So the prologue is going to tell us which map tiles to set up, and we always start with tile number 1, which is going to be this one right here. I'll go ahead and put my standee on there. I'm going to be the green player since I like to play as green, and I'm going to start out as just a walker. So I'm just using a standee for that. We're going to have multiple different walker cards. They're slightly different, so you do have some different starting powers. So you can randomly assign that, and then of course you're going to have the enemy decks. This is going to tell you how to set up the enemy deck. We're going to talk more about that a little bit later, which event cards we're going to use, and again, these are going to be basically story cards, and so I won't go too deep into it. I don't want to spoil too much, but it'll at least give you enough to kind of teach you a little bit how to play, which tokens to assign, and those are going to be set out on these hexes like so, everything randomized and faced down. And then we're going to start with event number 1. And that's kind of how we get started. But there's more pieces to that than just the board. Now, that's the board. That's kind of where we're going to play. We also have our player board here. And this is going to be important because we're going to have a lot of things going on in here. First off, we have shield level, firewall level, and recharge level. We're going to put a little dot in each of those to mark those that they're level 0 right now. And then we also have a trace board over here. So these are just different power-ups and things that you can spend during your turn and during combat rounds to either re-roll dice or absorb damage and get rid of bad little elements that'll show up here in your cyber deck. And then this is the trace board, where if you move and you kind of basically cause ruckus out in this city that is largely controlled by machines, then they can like try and trace you and hack you, and you're trying to be avoided, right? And so the higher this gets, you're more likely to attract unwanted attention. And so by doing actions and doing things, you have a chance of raising this trace level. So that's just kind of how you detect that. It's basically how much noise you're making in the city, so to speak, digital noise, if you will. So I'm just going to assign one of these bodies at random, and of course, as we upgrade bodies, we'll get new body cards. But this is the main point we have to talk about right here. This is the cyber deck. So you're going to have all of these. You're going to have 4 of each of these tokens, these colored tokens. You have yellow, blue, green, and red. You're going to have 4 each of those, and those are going to go into your starting bag. Again, I did say that this was a bag builder, so let me go ahead and populate this bag. All right, so now that I've kind of gotten my player board set up and I've built my bag, I've got 4 each of the tokens in my bags. I'm going to be pulling those out sort of at random, kind of like how a deck builder works instead of a deck, though I have a bag. And there's a lot of bag builder games out there already. We're going to start off with our quest, and here is basically the opening text, and you can read through all of that. If you want to read all of it, you can pause right now, and then you'll flip it over, and you're going to do what this says. But I'm going to set this to the side right now, because basically what this wants you to do is it wants you to find a red exploration token. When we start talking about actions and moving through the map, we'll just have to remember that we're looking for a red exploration token. And you're going to be doing some quest steps at the beginning of every turn, but after the quest is done, then each player will then do their programming phase. And this is really cool. This is where we start looking at this board. Now you'll see this kind of looks a little bit like a chess or checkers board. We want to focus on these highlighted spaces here. Those are the spaces that we're going to be randomly pulling tokens out of our bag, and we're going to populate those from top, just in the same way that we read from left to right, top to bottom, left to right. All right. Left to right and top to bottom. So we're going to just, wow, and did I shuffle this? I promise I did. There we go. And I'm going to just do all of this. And everybody can do these at the same time, this phase, because as you're doing this, it can be time consuming if you're waiting for everybody else. All right. So now I've got my board randomized and populated. I get to do some programming. And so what I want to do is I want to reference some parts of my character, my pro value. That is the programming value. That basically gives me moves. Now, programming moves here are going to remind you of certain games that you have played before. This may feel familiar to you if you play a lot of smartphone games or things like that, because I'm going to get 4 moves. And a move is basically an orthogonal move, up, down, left, or right, of any piece that I want. And so I might want to move this here. Now, if I do, I've got 3 of these in a row, and that certainly lets me do certain things, because there are certain algorithms and bonuses for having 3 of any given color in a row. And it just so happens that I can do this and get a move, and then that, and that's another move. and that lets me have 2 of those, and we're going to talk about what those do in a minute. But those are 2 of the move types that I can take. I can take 4 total moves. Another thing that I can do is I can do a swap if something is orthogonal. So if I wanted to move this red up here and swap it with the blue, that's going to be just 1 move. Well, technically, moving it up would be 1 move, and then swapping would be 1 move, right? So I could do that 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that would be my moves. Now, once I've done that, if I have 3 green together, I can get rid of these 3 and gain 1 shield, and shields are going to be useful for stopping damage. If I have 3 blue, I can gain a firewall, which is going to be useful for when we get bugs in the system. I can help get rid of those. And then if I have 3 red, which I don't, I could gain a recharge, which lets me get a reroll. And so in this case, I only have the 3 green, which is going to gain a shield, and I'm going to spend all 3 of those, and those are going to go into my dump. The dump is kind of like a discard pile, and so when you run out of cards and you can't pull anything else out of your bag, when you run out of tokens, that is, then you're going to take everything in the dump and put it back in. So think of it as a discard pile, just like kind of functioning how certain bag builders work. I also am going to gain a virus token by doing these 3. Now, what is a virus token? You're probably wondering. That sounds really bad. Well, it's not really bad. It's actually pretty good. A virus token is basically a wild, and that can count as anything I want. So when I gain a token, it's going to go into my dump, go back in the bag, and then once they come out, boom, I got a virus token. That's really good. But if I get too many viruses, I can eventually get bugs. Bugs are going to look like this, and they are basically dead spots. So when they come out, they are hard to get rid of. And so again, that's what the firewall is helpful for letting bugs kind of get cleaned out of your system. So these are kind of like a dead card that goes into your deck if it were a deck builder. So think of them as a dead token that goes into your bag. So you don't want to use too many wilds, but it's really nice to have at least 1 or 2 in your bag, and they allow you to do other things. Now, these aren't the only kind of actions that you're going to be doing on this board, because all of your location actions and special actions that's going to be on your augmentations are also going to be triggered by this. But it's important to leave as many blank shaded spots as you can, because next turn, when it's your turn again, you're going to repopulate these again. And so if you don't move them very much, you won't be able to get any new colors out onto your board. We're also going to have the Fatalist deck here. I just chose one of the decks at random, but these are basically the augmentations that you're going to have. And you're going to start with 2 of them. And there's a lot of different things that are in here, but I'm going to start with these 2 that are the starters, and they're indicated by this little dash here. And so these are special powers that my character has. And so between body and then your deck, you can actually have lots of different combinations on how you want to play, adding a lot of replayability to this game. But there's going to be a whole bunch more in here, and if you'll notice, there's different numbers next to them. They all require higher and higher numbers of XP to unlock. Think of as you're kind of going to a chop shop and having somebody install some augmentations into your system. And these are going to be all kinds of things that are maybe like extra damage, right? So if I get 3 reds with this one, I can deal 3 damage as opposed to this one, which is just a red and anything else, and I can deal 1 damage. And of course, that means that with these 2 right here, I would be able to trigger this if I got into a fight. And so they are all going to give you new abilities that you can do, passive things or active things, combat specific things. So and there's different decks that will do different things. So we also have the anonymous deck. And this one has also got some combat, and then it's got a malware, and it gives you firewalls and things like that. So they're all going to be a little different, and they all offer a lot of different replayability. So I'm going to leave these 2 out here right now as well. And of course, as we do more progression through the game, we're going to be gaining XP and being able to get more of these. We can potentially overwrite other ones, or maybe have a 3rd one out there. And however you want to play, if you want to go more combat oriented, maybe you leave this one and then you overwrite some of the other ones, or what. But you can only have 3 of these out at any given time, and that's about it for the augmentations. One more thing you'll notice about your cyber deck here before I move on is that your top row is going to be locked out, and you can unlock each individual square for 3 XP each, and as the game goes on. And once you get that whole row unlocked, you're going to have a lot more opportunities to get more tokens out there, be able to play more of your tokens in a single round, and have bigger and better combinations of different things that you can trigger. But also you're going to get this 2x spot. and this one is anything that is in that spot when you trigger something else, it's going to double it. So, for example, if I had a blaster triggered from in that, that was part of that, maybe I did it that way, I would be able to do that twice. So like that's a really cool thing. Or if I'm doing 3 of something to gain shields or whatever, I can double it. So it's basically a really effective spot to be able to unlock and to try to gravitate your best combos to have in the top left corner. So on your turn, after you've done all of your cyber deck and your programming phase, you're now going to enter your action phase, and you can take one of up to 3 actions. Generally, they're going to be moving around the map. So I might move here, and once I move here, then I'm going to flip this over once it's explored, and then I'll flip over the token that's on here as well. Now, this token is for a wild token, and there's a lot of different tokens you can get. Some of them are going to give you tokens, the extra tokens that go in your bag. Some of them are going to be quest related. Like, remember, we are looking for a red quest marker, so that's going to be somewhere on the map, and that's going to trigger the next part of our actual quest. And of course, we have a certain amount of time to do that on our tutorial mission here, because we have basically 2 turns to find it before time runs out and we will lose. So you definitely do need to be exploring. So those are some actions. You can also do combat if you have one of the various different types of creatures on you. And so we have lots of different robotic and nasty things that can be going after you. A pulverizer here. We've got a whirlpool. Look at all of this stuff. We got really cool art. I love the way these things look. All right, and so these are all different types of encounters that we can have, and we'll talk about those a little bit more in just a minute. But those are really fun to well, not fun to have on you, but it's fun to try and kill them, and that's definitely something that's going to be part of these missions. So I can move around. Now, I can take up to 3 actions, but it's important to know that after I've taken all of my actions, maybe I'm going to go here into the middle here and flip over this one, and that one will be a shield. Now, I don't get these tokens just by discovering them. You only get these tokens by being the first person to actually do the location action. So that's another type of action you can take, is a location action. And so to do a location action, here, let's pull up the hospital, right? So here I could recover all integrity. Now, what is integrity? Remember we were talking about the pro value on somebody before? Now, that's their programming value. Integrity is right here. That's your health, basically. Because you're not really completely a physical being, they don't want to call it body or hit points, it's integrity. So as you take wounds, your program is damaged, so to speak, you lose structural integrity, or you lose programmatic integrity. And so that's your hit points, that's how much damage you have. So that you can get healed up at the hospital. The other number you have on here is attack, which is how much damage you will deal when you successfully hit an enemy. So if you wanted to heal to full, you could do that at the hospital. You'd have to have 2 of these tokens next to each other on your cyber deck. And of course, you could do that action. That's the cost for that action. So now you're starting to see the importance of the cyber deck and a lot of the different actions you can take. It's not all just things that are on your basic algorithms. It's also stuff that's on your augmentations. It's also stuff that's on locations. And it's also ways to get new bodies. For example, the Garden of Bodies here lets you draw 2 body blueprints and discard one of them. And I'm really glad that came out, because let's talk about getting new bodies. So this is what body blueprints sort of look like, and they have definitely more significant patterns, and they're not easy to get. So, you can use wildcards to go along with this. However, I will point out that if you manage to get a body linked to your ×2 multiplier on your board, you're not going to get that body twice. It's not like you become like a giant, although that would be kind of funny. But yeah, so and then you'll be able to look at 2 and pick which one you want to go into if you do that location information. Now, you can't morph into the new body. You'll basically just take the card and set it over kind of by your area. Now that becomes another thing that you can do, but you have to find the location. So let me just flip over to where is it. There's only one place where you can do this. Here it is. It's the Des Rubles workshop. So if you manage to find your way to the Rubles workshop and you have a new body blueprint, you can do that particular action to change into bodies. And since this one is rogue, I would then drop my walker body, take my ring out, and put it onto rogue like so, and then boom, I'm now rogue. Now, at the end of my action step, for every action that I took, I'm actually going to have to roll a die to see if I trace. Now, the dice for this game either have a normal type of hit side or a critical side, which has the extra chevron on top of the little diamond, or a blank, which is possible to get a blank. So you'll roll this die, and I'll roll it one time per action. So if I took 3 actions, maybe I moved 3 times. First time I get a blank, so I don't have to increase my trace. If I roll it again and I get a crit, I have to increase my trace twice. So 1, 2, and then the third time is a blank. Wow. So, but if I were to get a hit, I would only increase my trace once. Now that was actually a pretty good turn for me. I only had to move up 2 spots. But if I were to get into the higher levels, I would have to draw an enemy and they would attach it to my character. If I got into here, I'd have to draw 2 enemies and take the worst, more dangerous one. Or if I would get all the way up to here, I'd draw 2 enemies and keep both of them. And enemies are a little bit problematic, as the quests will sometimes have you get attacked by enemies, or they will find you as you continue to do actions. So let's talk a little bit about how enemies and combat work. So let's start off with the scanning bot. He's kind of a lower level enemy, and let's say he's attached to us. He's a level 1 enemy. The level of the enemies is going to be important because you're going to be building a deck for these enemies, and you're going to be sorted by level. So early on in encounters, you're more likely to get lower level enemies, and as the encounter and as the scenario progresses, you'll get higher and higher level enemies. Integrity, again, is how many hit points this particular bot has, and his attack value, he's going to hit for only 1 if he hits you. He also has a critical keyword, so if in combat, when you roll a die and you get a critical, that doesn't mean you're getting extra damage. It only means that it's 1 damage, but it also will trigger any critical effects that your character has printed. Starting characters like the Walker don't have any critical effects, but there are ways to get critical effects. Maybe a different character has a critical, a different body has a critical, or maybe you'll have an augmentation or something that has a critical effect on it as well. But if he is attacking you and he gets a critical, you get trace +1, which means wherever your marker is on the trace track, you have to increase it 1 more. Now, when you're doing combat against this guy, you also have the option to spend some tokens if you happen to get these symbols in your cyber deck. So I could spend a yellow next to a blue to deal an extra damage to him. I could spend a wild to reduce my trace level by 2, like I'm hacking into him and giving false leads to the system. Or I could spend 2 red to escape, which gets rid of him, but it gains me a bug, and bugs are really bad. Remember, we talked a little bit about these bug tokens that go in your bag. They're like basically dead bugs. So escape is always an option unless the scenario specifies that you cannot, and there are certain like boss fights that you can't escape. But for normal encounters, there's always the option to escape. So when you're doing combat, let's say I have him attached to me, and one of my actions is that I'm going to fight him. I'll roll the die, and boom, I got a damage. So I'll mark him with a damage. I'll go ahead and put a little die on him that he's got 1. But that was one of my actions. Now, on that same combat, let's say I want to also do finger knives. I'll spend these 2 because that matches up there. I can do an extra damage to him. And then a second action will be 1 more damage, and then he will go away because that's his 3rd point of damage. And then he's gone, and I get some experience, and I'm happy. But then there were still some actions, so we'll still have to consider rolling for the trace value for every action that I took. So you might not actually always want to take 3 actions. So at the end of the round, after all players have gone, any enemies that are still attached are going to attack you. You may have to spawn enemies depending on the scenario, and you will then move on to the next turn. And if you have completed whatever the scenario wants you to do, you may go on to the next scenario card. I won't spoil too much of the prologue scenario, but it does kind of walk you through a lot of the basic steps on how to play the game and a lot of the stuff that we talked about. So again, you can do this solo, but it's going to be a little easier to do it with at least one other player because you'll have an easier time exploring the board and not necessarily having to spend your first 2 turns just moving, looking for that red token. There's going to be other colored tokens. There's different scenarios that might have you exploring. The boards will get bigger and bigger as you get more advanced and play past the prologue. And there's a whole lot more to discover in this game with higher level enemies, new augmentations that you can unlock, as well as new bodies. So hopefully this just whets your appetite and teaches you a little bit about Tamashii. Well, I hope that was helpful and gave you a little bit of insight into Tamashii Chronicles of Ascend. I want to give a big thanks to all of you guys for sticking with me watching this video. Let me know what you guys think. And I also want to thank Awaken Realms Lite for sending this out so I could check it out. And certainly very, very interested. If you guys don't know, one of my favorite video games in a long time was Cyberpunk 2077. So ever since kind of getting involved in that, I'm really into a lot of cyberpunk themed and a lot of that whole genre, and so this definitely scratches that itch for me. So yeah, again, if you like this video, stick around. I cover a lot of tabletop games, a lot of Star Wars and sci-fi games as well as sometimes collectibles, helmets, lightsabers, all kinds of stuff like that, tabletop miniatures, terrain, all kinds of that stuff. So if you like what you see, I'd love to have you stick around or join our Discord. We'll get links and for all of that stuff down in the description below. I want to thank you all so much for hanging out with me today, and I will talk to you soon. As always, may the Force be with you.